to frame size. And you'll notice that the scale up here stays at 100, although it is scaled up to frame size. Now, what's the actual difference? Scale to frame size will actually scale up your clip. It will leave the physical scale at 100, but it will rasterize it at your timeline resolution. Now, what does that actually mean in layman's terms? I prefer not to use scale to frame size because if you ever push in on that footage, you're way more likely to pixelate than using set to frame size. Typically, the only time you'll want to use scale to frame size is if you're using graphics or lower thirds or anything that you know that the actual scale will never change, and then that way it rasterizes it at the timeline resolution and you don't ever have to worry about it. Use set to frame size pretty much all the time, especially when you're doing 1080 to 4K or 4K to 1080. Use set to frame size because then when you actually look at the scale properties, you'll know whether or not it was a scaled clip or not, whereas scale to frame size, it stays at 100, so you're actually not sure what was 1080, what was 4K, etc. I know that was probably confusing, but just use set to frame size, okay? Moving on, Nest. Here we got that same clip, and say I want to stabilize this clip, right? So I'm gonna set to frame size. There you go. Come over to my effects, type in warp stabilizer and just drag a warp stabilizer on it. And then I immediately get a notification. Requires clip dimensions to match source, fixed by nesting. So basically what nesting is a way for you to kind of trick Premiere into thinking that the clip that's in there is actually part of the timeline, so you can use various effects and stuff like that. So my keyboard shortcut is Shift-N. You can make it whatever you want, again, and you can name it, click on it, whatever. And now if I try to drop a warp stabilizer on there, it will actually analyze the clip. Over here, it has a little running tally of how many frames are left in the warp, and that's nesting. Speed! All right, check this out. Here's a clip of my buddy Jared riding his bike. Now, I shot this at 120 frames a second, so you can see he's zooming pretty fast, looking like a badass on his mountain bike, but this clip is way too fast. Since I shot it in 120 frames a second, I'm going to click on my speed, which is M3 on my keyboard, the macro key. Check this out. Boom, one click, and it brings up the speed. I'm going to change this to 20% speed because 120 FPS, you can actually go down to 20% without getting much distortion or pixelation. If you're shooting 60 FPS, you can go down to about 50%. And if you're shooting 2397 or 2997, you really can't do anything. You can maybe go down to 90 and get away with it, but I don't recommend doing any speed. But since we shot at 120, I can put this at 20%. And now look at this, beautiful slow-mo. He's not moving fast anymore. And that clip turned into a 19-second clip, where before it was only 3.5 seconds barely. So that's the speed key. Boom, go down to 20, and there you go. Especially helpful if you're shooting in high frame rates. And last but not least, we got paste attributes. Now, this one is one of my favorite ones, especially when you're doing any sort of effects or anything. So let's come up to effects, and let's just come down here to video effects, and we're gonna put a mirror effect, right? Okay, cool. So the mirror effect's on there. We'll mess with this here. So it looks like he's riding his bike into himself. Very cool. And now say I want to copy that effect onto all of my other videos. Now what you could do is you could right click, you can come up to copy, then you can come over here, you can click, no, stop doing that, keyboard shortcuts. That's the whole point of this video. If you were actually considering it and you were like, yeah, that's what you do, you're not getting the point of the video, all right? Use keyboard shortcuts. Check this out. I'm going to click on my clip, I'm going to hit Control-C like I'm copying anything on any computer, and then I'm just going to highlight the clips that I want to paste it to. I'm going to hit my Paste Attributes button, and it'll tell you what you're going to paste. The motion, the opacity, the time remapping, and the effects. Since I only really have effects on there, none of this stuff really matters, so I'm going to click OK, and then check it out. All of my clips are now mirrored, and everything is good in the world, and I only had to use like 2 clicks. It also works on audio, my friends. Check this out. If I lower down this audio to like 12.23, I can just simply hit copy on the audio, come over here, paste attributes. Now you see that these are checked for audio attributes, and I'm going to click OK. And then it sets all the audio levels to that level, and I don't have to drag these down, and I don't have to worry about getting it exactly perfect with the decibel levels. Keyboard shortcuts. All right, now what did we learn today? I am listening. That's right, we learned that keyboard shortcuts are the shit. It will dramatically increase your workflow. It will dramatically increase your productivity, and you won't waste time, and you'll be happier at the end of the day because your life just got a whole lot easier. To recap, set your own keyboard shortcuts by coming up to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then typing in all the things that we talked about in this video today. So it's Ripple Delete, Enable, Nest, Set to Frame Size, Speed, and Paste Attributes. Those are the 6, I promise you, that will change your life if you use them on a daily basis. As always, thank you for watching this video. I truly hope that you learned something valuable from me today and you will go off on your journey of keyboard shortcut-ness. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and also check out the last video that you missed. I'm here every week, guys. I try to upload every Sunday. You know, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Naughty and Sans. Hit me up, direct message, ask me to do a special video for you, and maybe I'll do it. That's what this video was. Hit that subscribe button, check out the last video, and I'll see you guys next time.
Hello everybody, welcome to the ChinFat channel. In this tutorial, I'm demonstrating 15 shortcuts that are going to be used in Premiere Pro that's going to help you with your editing. Most of these are keyboard shortcuts. Let's get started right away. First of all, if you're on a
Alright, hello and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. You might wonder, why are my hands here and why is the keyboard being shown? And that is because this video, as you obviously know already from the title, is about Photoshop's keyboard shortcuts. And these will save you so much time you don't understand yet, but it's wonderful. So, first to start off, we're going to just open a thing. Actually, you know what? There's another keyboard shortcut for that. Control-O. There we go. I don't know why it was taking so long. Okay, desktop. I've got my... where is it? Photoshop tutorials video. And here's another little dog, because I've decided every little dog, or every tutorial is going to have a dog for the video. And look at it, just being adorable. So, first control, or keyboard shortcut is very simple. And that is the copy shortcut, which you know from every other program, every survival selection. Command-C. And that's copied. And now I can go on new layer. And Command-J. Or not Command-J, what am I doing? Command-V. And that copies it. So we've got this other little thing. This next one is incredibly important. And you'll use it all of the time. Again, pretty much all these are. I'm not going to show you all the obscure ones, but just these main ones are very important. If you have a selection, or let's make it more interesting, we'll do like this strange shape of a selection. So you see we've got it selected, and we have the background layer, so the layer with this image selected. It's always important. And then Control, or let's move the keyboard over so you can see. Control-J will, as you see here, made that, so we'll make this background disappear. Not only copies the thing, but it already pastes it onto a new layer. So whatever selection you have, or even if you don't have a selection, let's delete that. And as we have here, if we just do Control-J, that duplicates the layer. So pretty much whatever is selected will become in addition to whatever. It doesn't change the original picture, and then on the next layer puts that on it. I don't know how to explain, but yeah. Next is Control-A. So Control-A will select everything. Pretty, like, I don't know, it's simple, but it's useful. Like if you have a lot of things and you don't want to have to go select all of them, just Control-A, and then you've got the whole thing. So that's nice. Trying to think. Next, if you press X, it switches between these two. Or, oh wow, I have my boundaries messed up. Let me fix that on my recording software. Okay, there we go. So here, see these two? These are both of our colors on the color palette. So if we click it, of course, like I showed you in the last video, it'll bring up your primary color, but you also have the secondary color, so you can switch easily between. You can press this button, but even easier, you can press X, which alternates between. So that's nice. Of course, Control-Z undoes. So say we draw this horrible that over and we're like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that, and then you just press Control-Z and it's gone. All set. And if you want to do multiple, you can do Control-Z but only do one thing, like, and then if you press it again, it'll put it back. But if you want to just keep going further back, you do Control-Alt-Z, and then it'll go back, probably go like 30 steps. Like we've gone through the whole tutorial already. So it can do a lot. Next is the brackets. So see, we have our little paintbrush tool. This applies to every, like the eraser tool, everything that has like a certain portion of the screen that it selects. If you press the bracket buttons, it makes them the brush bigger or smaller. Bigger or smaller. Again, you can always do that in the little paintbrush menu up here, but this is significantly more convenient, you know? Again, Control-Alt-Z to keep going back. That might actually just be it. Like, there are, if you can remember those, how many was that, like 5? I don't remember exactly. But if you can remember those ones, you're set. Again, if you want to know any additional keyboard shortcuts, oh, okay, just kidding, one more. If you hold Alt, this one's super important too. If you hold Alt and scroll, that zooms. Again, there is the zoom button here, but it's so much easier to just hold Alt and then zoom. And it's like, yeah, especially since when you use this tool, like it's just little increments. And yeah, it's much less, like here you can do whatever level you want. The other one's kind of like different steps. So that's an important one. So other than that, I'm fairly sure that's all the ones you really need to know at this point. Tab will like fill the screen with this, but I never use that anyway, so that's not super important. But yeah, that's my little breakdown on Photoshop's wonderful keyboard shortcuts. So just go watch this video like 50 times. Whatever you can do to make sure you remember all of those, you will use them all the time, I promise. They are so useful. And yeah, I guess another one, Control P, is to print, but that's not. I mean, you don't print that often, so you can always just do File Print, you know. But if you want to learn any other keyboard shortcuts, of course, any of the things in this drop-down menu are available here. So that's nice. Some people use these ones a lot. Like the Control U, Control. Let me see, my camera's blocking that. Yeah. So all these ones. But personally, I don't find it that difficult to go up here. But pretty much whatever preference you want, you can pretty much hold your mouse over this one, like I'm hovering my mouse over the T, just leaving it there. And then this will pop up and it says horizontal type tool, parentheses T, so that means T will switch to that tool. I think V goes to your move tool, so that's a nice one actually. You can use V. But yeah, so pretty much any additional ones you want to learn, just hold over that. And yeah, so I've been Just Viking Coconut, Tom, I have too many names. But yeah, I hope you learned something. This will be crucially important. This has been episode 2, but I'm not intending this series to be chronological, so you can watch them in whatever order you want. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned, and I will see you in the next tutorial.
So I just created this dope website with Wix. Let me show you how I did it. First up, go to Wix.com. Now this is where the magic happens. You're gonna add an image and some text. Oh, that's nice. First what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the font. Wait a minute, Frank, Brandon, David, who are these guys? You know, one day I'm gonna create Feral font. You guys know I got a lot of videos. Here, I've uploaded them all. And with a subscription, you guys can check out my top secret material.
Hey, yo, I'm killing it in this high quality.
See, I'm a sharing kind of guy. So here's my Instagram, instant access. I look good, what? Man, I know how hard it is to make people stand up and listen, but with a site like this, you're already there. Go to Wix.com and create your stunning website today.
Welcome to another Photoshop tutorial from tutorvid.com. This tutorial is going to show you 10 essential Photoshop shortcuts in 60 seconds. First ones I use most often are for getting around the image. To zoom in on a specific spot of a photo, use Control and Spacebar, hold them down, and click and drag the mouse. Once you're zoomed in, to drag around the image, hold down the spacebar, and you can click and drag the image to where you want it. If you want to zoom out and in of the image just a small bit, use Control minus to go zoom out and Control plus to zoom in. If you want to fit the image to the screen, press Control 0, and if you want to zoom into 100%, press Control Alt 0. If you want to look at your image without all these sidebars, you can press Tab to quickly hide them. And if you want to get rid of your menu bar and everything, just press F and that'll toggle through all the menus so you have just a clear full screen. If you're using the brush, to change the brush size quickly, you can press the square right and left bracket. To change the brush softness, press Shift and square bracket. To flip your background and foreground colors, press X, and to get them to default black and white, press D. And that's it, 10 quick shortcuts to speed up your workflow in Photoshop. Check out more tutorials on tutorvid.com. Bars, you can press tab, click and drag the mouse. Once you're zoomed in, to dribble 0, and if you want to zoom into 100%, press.
Today I'm going to add hours to your life. Hey guys, welcome to Flearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on Twitter at AKNacer. Today I've got something really exciting for you. Actually, you might think it's totally lame, but I think it's really exciting. We're going to talk about keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to show you guys some of the commonly used ones and how to make your own. And below we got a link to our commonly used keyboard shortcut list. Well, why are we doing this? Well, the biggest thing that makes me fast in Photoshop is using keyboard shortcuts. When I watch other people do Photoshop and they're kind of like hunting and like kind of moving all around the screen and things like that, that's just taking up valuable time. And although it might not seem like it matters a lot, if you can save like a few minutes here and a few minutes there, eventually it's going to add up and you get more time of your life back because you can edit much faster. So creating keyboard shortcuts are going to really help that out, and especially if you can create custom keyboard shortcuts to things that you do most common in Photoshop. So I'm going to show you guys just a quick example of how I use keyboard shortcuts, and then we're going to talk about how to create some custom ones. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. I don't have a document open, and that's on purpose because I'm going to create a new one by hitting Command-N. By the way, anytime I say Command, if you guys are on a PC, it's going to be Control. If I say Option, it's going to be Alt for you, and Shift remains the same. So Command-N creates a new document, and then you can just say, that looks good, and hit OK. For the most part, I work on my images in full screen mode. I like that they take up the entire screen. So you can get to that by hitting F. If you'd like that out of it, you can hit Shift F or F 3 times. Okay, so let's go to our full screen mode. Now, if you want to move things around, hold down your space bar and click and move anywhere you want. I'm not even going to use my Wacom tablet today. All of the tools over here on the left also have keyboard shortcuts to get to them. Things like on the top left, you have your marquee tool. M is your marquee tool. And you can see if you hover over it, it'll say elliptical marquee. There we go. And it'll have parentheses M. Now, if you'd like to go through, there are a couple different marquee tools. So if you want to kind of go through those, you can hold down the Shift key and then hit M, and you can see that it's flipping through those. All right, let's say like L is our lasso tool, so you can hit L for there, and then hold Shift and hit L a couple times. That's going to kind of rotate through those. W is the wand tool, V is the move tool, C is the crop tool, J is the healing brush tool, S is the clone stamp tool, B is the brush tool, G is the gradient tool, E is the eraser tool. So all these things you can see, you can hit a button, and if you're here in the middle of working on your document, you don't have to like go back over here and kind of work on things. So those are some really big things that are going to help save a lot of time. Let's go to our brush tool, and I'll talk about a couple of these keyboard shortcuts that are really going to help save you some time as well. Now, it's going to be Control and Option if you guys are on a Mac. It's going to be, it's going to be Control and Alt if you guys are on a PC. Just hit those two buttons down and click, and if you drag left or the right, it's going to make your brush either larger or smaller. And if you drag up or down, it's going to make your brush harder or softer. So some really great ways to control your brush size very easily. All right, let's do a couple of cool things. I'm going to hit M for my marquee tool, and I'm going to create a little marquee. And then we're going to fill this with a color. This is very handy. Filling selections with color on your layer mask is what I mostly use it for. So let's say you have a layer mask and you want to make everything invisible. You can fill with either your foreground or background color. So let's hit the D key on our keyboard. D is going to bring up your default colors, which will always be black and white. So D for your default colors, your foreground color will be black, your background color will be white. If I want to fill a selection with my foreground color, you hold down Option and hit Delete. If I want to fill it with my background color, Command and hit Delete. Pretty cool, huh? All right, let's just fill the entire thing, Option Delete, with our foreground color. And then if I want to invert that, which I do very frequently on layer mask, Command I will then invert it. So you can see you can do just about anything with a keyboard shortcut. Instead of going to invert like image, adjustments down here, then you got to look for it. Oh, there it is. Command I, invert. Just quite a bit faster. Now, if you guys are not used to using keyboard shortcuts, you can find them here. Everything you see will actually have a keyboard shortcut if there already is a keyboard shortcut assigned to it. But we can take that a step further. Let's just say filter and blur. Let's say our Gaussian blur. Well, I created a custom keyboard shortcut for my Gaussian blur because I use it quite frequently. So I'll show you guys how to do that right now. But right now, unless you've already done it, you do not have a custom keyboard shortcut for a Gaussian blur. So let's say I wanted to fill that with a color. Option delete to fill with black. Command D to deselect. And then my keyboard shortcut for the Gaussian blur is Shift Option Command G, which brings up my Gaussian blur. And now I can go ahead and blur that. So you can see it just saves quite a bit of time. I use blurs all the time, and it's a good way to do it. Option Command Z will take a step back in time. So I'll show you guys how to do that same thing. You can create any keyboard shortcut that you'd like. Just go to Edit right over here, and then go down to where you see keyboard shortcuts. Or you can hit Shift Option Command K. There we go. Here are our keyboard shortcuts, and they're really easy to create in Photoshop. They make it very easy for you. What we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and go to the blur. So we're going to go to Filter, and you could just basically scroll down to, you have your blur, and then you have your few different blurs, and right over here you can see Gaussian blur. Let's just go ahead and subtract that out. So this is basically how it's going to look on yours if you don't have one set up. So let's say Gaussian blur, we want to set up a keyboard shortcut. Well, literally all you do is hold down the keys in which you need to, those are going to be the keys that are going to create the keyboard shortcut. So in this case, we're going to hold down Shift, Option, Command, and hit G. And we'll say accept. And then now our keyboard shortcut for the Gaussian blur is Shift, Option, Command, G. If you have other ones like adaptive wide angle, Shift, Command, A, I've never used that in my life, but if that's one that you want, now they're listed here as well. Let's try another one. Let's just say we're going to go to File, and I want to go to, let's see, if I want to go to Save. Let's say I don't even like the keyboard shortcut for Save. I want to make it my own. Well, let's click over here, and I'm going to hit Shift Command S. Now, what it's going to tell me is Shift Command S is already in use and will be removed from File, Save As if accepted. Now, you can undo this change. You can say like, oh, okay, it's already in use. I don't want to use it up. Or you can just say, okay, I'll accept that, and I'll go to accept that. So now, save is Shift Option Command S, and then just regular save as can be Command S. So if you want to switch those around, you can totally do that too. I don't like that, so I'm going to switch it back. Command S, accept to go to conflict, and then save as will be Shift Command S. There we go. So accept that as well. So a really great way to add keyboard shortcuts if you're not already using them. So a couple of them that I add, Shift Option Command G, we already talked about that one. That's a pretty good one for the Gaussian blur. Let's just hit cancel there. If I want to, let's just fill that with white. Shift Option Command N will create a new layer. That comes loaded by default. Let's go ahead and fill this. If I do want to crop to a certain area, which I do quite often, you can hold down the Command key, click on whatever's on a layer, and then set up the crop. And to do that, I don't have it set up on this computer. I have it set up on the one behind me. Let's set up crop. What do you say? We'll go to image, and then we'll go down here to crop. And I have that one set up as Shift Option Command. I believe it's down here at the bottom. Okay, there we go. Shift Option Command C, and it will say it will be removed from content aware scale, which is okay because I don't ever use that. So we're going to say okay. So this is selected. Shift Option Command C will now crop to exactly what you have selected, which is very nice. All right, Option Command Z will undo that. The high pass filter I have set up. I use that for sharpening quite a bit. So that is set up to Shift Option Command H. There we go. We've added a high pass filter onto a circle, which makes it gray. Very nice. You can use it for sharpening. In this case, it really doesn't do much. And then delete will delete the layer you're currently on, so you don't have to like click it and drag it to the trash can. Shift Option Command N will create a new layer. Delete will create a deleted layer. It won't create anything. It's just going to delete your current layer that you have. So that's it, guys. Some of the keyboard shortcuts that I use quite frequently, and then how to create them. And then down below, we have a very extensive list of the keyboard shortcuts we use, as well as some really cool wallpapers that you guys can put on your computer. So if there are anything that I missed, guys, if you have some keyboard shortcuts that you use and love, make sure to leave them in a comment down below. Help everyone out, help the community, help the family, help one another, and that's the end of the episode. Thanks so much, guys. I'll learn you later. Bye, everyone. Photoshop now responds to audible shortcuts as well. When I clap my hand twice, it's going to be the keyboard shortcut to end this episode.
In this video, I'm going to show you 10 really useful Photoshop keyboard shortcuts that you don't know, probably.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another very exciting tutorial here at the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. My name is Jesus Ramirez and you can find me on Instagram at jr.ppc.
In this Photoshop tutorial, I'm going to show you 10 really useful keyboard shortcuts that you probably don't know. If this is your first time at the Photoshop Training channel, then remember to subscribe and enable the notification bell. Also, as you're watching this video, let me know in the comments how many of these shortcuts were new to you, and also let me know what shortcuts I missed that you find really useful. That way, the comments section can be a good resource for great keyboard shortcuts. Okay, let's get started. The first shortcut is how to redo the last selection. Photoshop actually remembers the last selection that you used. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to select the quick selection tool and I'm going to make a selection around her arms. And I'm going to hold Alt, Option and the Mac to subtract from the selection. And now that I have her arm selected, I can create a new layer. And I'm just going to paint in a shadow. So I'm going to paint it black. Like so. Then I can press Ctrl D, Command D to deselect. And I can continue painting a shadow down here. And maybe now I want to add to the shadow or maybe create highlights on her sleeves. But I don't want to waste the time creating the selection again. So I can simply press Ctrl Shift D. That's Command Shift D in the Mac to bring back the last active selection. So now I can paint with white on a new layer with the overlay blending mode. And now I can create highlights on her sweater. Then I can press Ctrl D, Command D to deselect. And if I need to bring back the selection, once again, Ctrl Shift D, Command Shift D on the Mac. The next keyboard shortcut that I'm going to show you is the Lock Transparent Pixels shortcut. So I'm going to select the brush tool, and then I'm going to select the color that you can really see. So I'm going to select red, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to paint with red. So maybe you're painting or retouching or doing anything where you're creating new pixels on a blank layer. Then, if I want to make an adjustment, like maybe paint with a different color, so I'll select blue, and you want to paint directly over those pixels, but not affect the pixels that are transparent, then you're going to need to use this keyboard shortcut. I'm going to undo that by pressing Ctrl Alt C. What you want to do is press the question mark key, which is the / key, and then that locks transparent pixels. So when you paint, you only paint on the pixels that are opaque, not the transparent. Also notice in the layers panel that the lock transparent pixels icon is selected and there is a lock on that layer. So I can press the / key to remove that, and now I can paint anywhere in the layer. I can press the / key again and maybe use a different tool, like maybe the burn tool, and I can burn only the opaque pixels. I'm not generating any new ones by painting on transparent pixels. The next keyboard shortcut that I'm going to talk about is one that actually gave me a lot of problems when I was first starting out in Photoshop. I have the brush tool selected, and you can see the brush preview. If I use the bracket keys on the keyboard to increase or decrease the size of my brush, you'll see the cursor change. It's giving us a preview of the actual brush. But if you inadvertently hit the caps lock key, we no longer get that preview. We just have the crosshair cursor on our painting tool. So even if you decrease or increase the size of the brush, which I'm doing now, you won't see the preview. So make sure that the caps lock key is off if you're ever missing that preview of the brush. And the very first time that I came up across this problem, I actually ended up uninstalling Photoshop, believe it or not, because I thought my Photoshop was broken. That was back with Photoshop version 7. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who was confused by the caps lock key. If it's confused you as well, let me know in the comments below. But anyway, just remember, the cap lock key gives you the crosshair cursor or the brush preview, and I prefer the brush preview, of course. The next keyboard shortcut I want to show you is the fit to screen or bird's eye view keyboard shortcut, which is really the same one. So I'm going to press Ctrl T, Command T to transform, and I'm going to zoom out. Then I'm going to make this image larger, like so. Then I'm going to double tap on the hand tool, which fits the image to screen. And actually, the keyboard shortcut to fit to screen is Ctrl 0. However, when you press Ctrl T, Command T on the Mac to transform, but the corner handles are outside the canvas and you cannot see them, you can use that same keyboard shortcut, Ctrl 0, to zoom out and see the handles. So whenever you transform something and you don't see the handles, Ctrl 0, Command 0. Also, as a side note, Ctrl 1, Command 1 on the Mac zooms in to 100%, the actual view. So basically the same thing as double clicking on the hand tool or right clicking with the zoom tool and selecting 100%. In the next keyboard shortcut, I'm going to show you how to toggle the canvas color. So I'm going to zoom out just so that we can see. Sometimes you're working with an image and your canvas color really doesn't help you see the image. So you may need to change the color of it so that you can see the image better. So you can press the spacebar and the F key on the keyboard to toggle between the canvas colors. See that? See how I'm toggling between the canvas colors? And you can add your own custom canvas color if you like, but I prefer the presets that Photoshop has available. So once again, spacebar and the F key. If you want to toggle the canvas colors to the opposite direction, just add the shift key to that. The next keyboard shortcut that I'm going to show you is the feather selection keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to select the elliptical marquee tool and I'm going to create a very simple selection like so. Notice that the feather is set to 0, which means that if I create a new layer and fill, say, with the foreground color, and you can do so by holding Alt and Backspace, you will of course get a really sharp edge. But if you want to feather that, then what you would need to do is deselect, type in the feather amount that you want, and then make the selection again. But if you created a complicated selection, it might take you too long to redo the selection. So what you want to do is apply the feather to the selection. To do so, you can hold Shift and the F6 key, one of the function keys, Shift and F6, and that brings up the feather selection window, and you can enter a feather radius. We can try 20 pixels and press OK. Now, if we fill with the foreground color, Alt and Backspace, Option Delete on the Mac, you'll see now that we no longer have a sharp fill. We now have a fill with feather. In the next example, I'm going to show you how to use the spring-loaded keyboard shortcut. So this is not really a single keyboard shortcut. It's more of how the keyboard shortcuts affect the tools if you use them a certain way. So let's say we have the burn tool selected and I start burning the image and I want to zoom in. I can hold Z and I'm still holding Z, zoom in, release, and it goes back into the burn tool. So I didn't really have to select it again. So whenever you hold a keyboard shortcut down, the tool will temporarily be selected, and when you release, you'll go back to the previous tool. So maybe in this case, you can hold the R key to rotate, click and drag. We rotate the image, I release the R key, and I go back into the burn tool. I'm gonna rotate again. Now there's a trick to that, however. If you hold R and you click and drag to rotate, make sure that you release the mouse button first and then the R key. Because if you hold the letter R, click to rotate, and release the letter R first, it'll go into the actual rotate tool. See that, how that now is selected? So make sure that you release the mouse button first and then release the letter R. I'm going to double click on the rotate tool to bring it back to the regular view. And I'm just going to select the hand tool and double click on that to fit the image to screen. In the next example, I'm going to show you something that I have here on this folder. I have two circles, a black circle and a white circle. If you wanted to create a design where you're going to fill something around the circle, maybe you're creating a watch or something like that, there's a keyboard shortcut that you should know, which is the repeat the last transformation keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to press Control H, Command H to bring back guides that I was hiding. Control H, Command H hides the extras. And I'm going to press Control T, Command T to transform. Click and drag the pivot point to the center of that circle. Then I can change the rotation to 20 degrees and hit enter. So that of course rotates that circle into that position. Now, if I press Control Alt Shift T, Command Option Shift T to duplicate that same transformation onto a new layer, watch what happens. I'm pressing that same keyboard shortcut over and over and over again. So that duplicates that circle around the larger circle. And that works because we changed the pivot point to the center of the larger circle, and we change in increments of 20 degrees, which of course divides equally among the 360 degrees of a circle. So you can use this technique to create very interesting designs by simply duplicating the last transformation that you did onto a new layer. And the next keyboard shortcut that I want to show you is one that I use all the time. And I like to call it the whoopsie daisy key, because when you make a mistake, you can always go back and not even worry about pressing cancel or anything like that. Let me show you what I mean by that. So maybe you're working in Photoshop and you click on the crop tool and you decide that you no longer want to be in the crop tool. Maybe even you started making a crop, but you really want to cancel that. Simply press the escape key and that'll get rid of that. Maybe you open up a window. So let me switch tools and go into edit, fill, and decide that you no longer want the fill window. You can just press the escape key. The same thing will happen with any window. Maybe you press Control K, Command K on the Mac to bring up the preferences panel. Maybe you don't want it anymore. You can press the escape key. If you select the type tool and you click and you decide that you no longer want that text layer, you can simply press the escape key and that cancels out of that tool and the layer disappears. So if you make a mistake and you're in a tool or window that you don't want to be in, just hit the escape key. Now the next few examples are extras. These are just a couple things that I use all the time. So one of those is with text. So I'm going to create a text box. Then I'm going to go into type, paste lorem ipsum, which is the generic text. And I'm just going to press Control A, Command A to select all the text. And I'm going to change the color to white so that you can see it better. So notice how there's hyphens. That is hyphenation, and that's enabled by default. So if you want to get rid of the hyphens, just press Control A, Command A on the Mac to select all the text. And then you can press Control Alt Shift H. That's Command Option Shift H on the Mac. And it gets rid of all the hyphens. It removes the hyphenation. And the way of doing that without a keyboard shortcut is by going into the paragraph panel, clicking on the flyout menu, selecting hyphenation, and then unchecking this checkbox. So the keyboard shortcut is so much easier. Once again, the keyboard shortcut is Control Alt Shift H, Command Option Shift H on the Mac. Another keyboard shortcut that I use all the time is holding the Alt key on any one of these eye icons to hide all the other layers except for the layer that I clicked on. So I held Alt, Option on the Mac, clicked on this layer, and all the other layers were hidden. I can do the same thing again to bring them back. I can do the same thing with this black circle. So hold Alt, Option on the Mac, click on the eye icon to hide all other visible layers, and to bring them back, Alt, Option on the Mac, and click again. And the last bonus keyboard shortcut is another one that I use a lot when I make mistakes. Sometimes you just make too many mistakes on one file that you have to go back to the last time that you saved it, or to how the file first looked when it was open. You can simply press the F12 key on the keyboard, function 12, to revert the image. So how many of these shortcuts were new to you? Let me know in the comments below. And as I said earlier in the video, post your favorite keyboard shortcut not shown in this video in the comments. And check out what other people are commenting, and maybe you'll discover something that can be useful to you. Don't forget to click on that subscribe and notification buttons. I really hope that you enjoy this tutorial and that you learned something new. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon.
Kita bersama dengan Tia Arifin, Fozia Gaus, Diana Nasir, Nurul Zulkifli, Putri Sarah Liana, Nat Zainal, Erin Malik, Bella Astilan, Black dan juga Amira Zaini.
Lactogrow memahami, membesar ceria bermula dari hati. Sejak awal lagi, Lactogrow, grow happy.
Jangan lupa menonton celoteh si manja bersama Lactogrow. Tiap Sabtu hanya.
In this video, I'm going to show you 5 must-know Photoshop tips and tricks for photographers. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Photoshop tutorial. My name is Jesus Ramirez. You can find me on Instagram at JRFromPTC. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you 5 must-know Photoshop tips and tricks for photographers. The tips are going to deal with masking, portrait retouching, different color modes, and workflow examples to speed up your retouching. Okay, let's get started. In the first tip, I'm going to show you how to work with luminosity mask. We're going to work with this image here, and we want to adjust the highlights of the image. So the easiest way to select the highlights of the image is by pressing Ctrl-Alt-2, that's Command-Option and the number 2 on the Mac, and that makes a selection around the bright pixels of the image. If I create an adjustment layer, like the curves adjustment layer, that selection gets applied to the layer mask. If I hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask, you can see we made a selection out of the bright pixels. So obviously it looks like a black and white image. White reveals and black conceals. So right now we're mainly targeting the bright pixels of the image. So if I make an adjustment, you'll notice that we target mainly the bright pixels. We can do the opposite by selecting the layer mask, clicking on invert, and now we're targeting the dark pixels. If I hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask, you'll see that we have mainly the dark pixels selected. So I can go into the curve, make that adjustment, and it only affects the dark tones of the image. And let me just show you quickly why that keyboard shortcut works. If I go into the channels panel, you'll see that we have Ctrl-2, Ctrl-3, Ctrl-4, Ctrl-5. If I press Ctrl-3, that's Command 3 on the Mac, I select that channel. Ctrl-4 and Ctrl-5. I'm simply selecting them. But if I want to load them as selections, Ctrl-Alt-5 makes a selection out of the brighter pixels of that channel. Ctrl-2 is the RGB mode, and it also contains the luminance. So Ctrl-Alt-2 will select the luminance values. Another way of doing that, if you cannot remember the keyboard shortcut, is by simply holding Control, that's Command on the Mac, and clicking on the RGB thumbnail, and that makes the exact same selection as pressing Ctrl-Alt-2. And once again, that selects the brighter pixels of the image, and that's how you can target those pixels with adjustment layers. In this tip, I'm going to show you a fast and efficient way of removing wrinkles, blemishes, and other distractions from the face. So if we wanted to remove the wrinkles on her chin, you probably would use something like the Spot Healing Brush tool with Content Aware, and that would be a good place to start. You would create a new layer, make sure that Sample All Layers is selected so that we can work non-destructively, and then you would come in here and try to paint away those wrinkles. And Photoshop does a pretty decent job at it, but if you zoom in close, you'll see that it's not looking very good. It's destroying the detail found in the image, and that is because we had a really strong highlight on the chin. So we want to try to keep that detail so that the adjustment looks more realistic. So I'm going to delete that layer, I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to show you a method that you should use. With the Spot Healing Brush tool selected, think of the blemish, wrinkle, or distraction you're trying to remove. Is it darker than the skin tone, or is it brighter than the skin tone? In this case, the wrinkle is darker than the skin tone. That means that we want to lighten that wrinkle. So, under Mode, select Lighten, and then do the same thing. Just start painting, and you'll see that the wrinkle gets removed, but we don't lose that highlight, and the chin remains more realistic. So that's before and after. And like with any other retouching job, extremes are not that good. Bring down the opacity down to about 70%. You just want to minimize the distracting element, not necessarily remove it completely from the face. And you can keep doing the same with all the other wrinkles on the face. At some point, you're going to run into a different kind of problem, where you click and drag to remove the distraction, but it doesn't go away. In this case, the wrinkle or distraction is brighter than the skin tone. That means that we will never be able to remove it because of the mode that we're on. But if we change it to darken, because we want to darken that blemish, or that wrinkle rather, then we can remove it. That's before and after. Obviously, if we bump up the opacity to 100%, it completely removes it. But again, I don't think that's the way to go. Usually in retouching, I like to keep things subtle and a little more realistic. So I think that's the way to go. At about 60 to 70% in this case, so we'll split the difference and go to 65, before and after. This technique also becomes really useful in areas that contain detail and have blemishes that you would like to remove. In this case, I have blemishes on his forehead that I would like to remove, but there's fine detail that I would like to keep, like these strands of hair. So, if I create a new layer to work non-destructively, make sure that sample all layers is checked, and just to show you, I'm going to select the normal mode, which is what most people use. So if I were to start removing blemishes, like so, notice that I get a lot of distortion in the image. I don't keep the fine detail, and I introduce detail I don't want, and these strands of hair don't look realistic. So I'm going to undo those brush strokes by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Z, and I'm going to change my mode to lighten, because the blemishes that I want to remove in this image are darker than the skin tones. So I can start removing these blemishes. Right away, you see that I don't lose any of the detail. All the detail is kept. I can even remove that wrinkle, and all the strands of hair are fine. And I can continue painting away other wrinkles in the image. And of course, I'm working non-destructively, so that's before and after. So I recommend you looking at the lighten and darker modes when working with the spot cleaning brush tool and content aware to remove blemishes, wrinkles, and other distractions from faces. In this tip, I'm going to show you how to work with the same document in two windows. The reason that you would want to work with the same document in two windows is so that you can both work with fine details and the overall image at the same time. Let me show you what I mean by that. We're going to work with this image of this castle, and I'm going to go into Window, Arrange, and at the very bottom select New Window 4 and the name of the file. So now I have the same file open in two windows. Then I can go into Window, Arrange, 2 up vertical or 2 up horizontal. In this case, we'll do 2 up vertical, and it puts the same document side by side on two different windows. This works better when you're working with two monitors. I do have two monitors here, but you can only see one through the recording, so we're gonna have to do it all in one monitor. But anyway, on the left hand side, I'm gonna zoom in, and then I'm just gonna look at the details of the image. So maybe we wanna remove some of these windows. On the right hand side, I want to zoom out so we can see the overall image. So you can double tap on the hand tool, maybe even zoom out further than that. So maybe something like that so we can see the overall image. Then I'm going to create a new layer to work non-destructively, and I'm going to click on the clone stamp tool, and we're just going to clone this area out. Make sure that sample all layers is selected, and I'm just going to hold Alt, Option on the Mac, click on the sample source, and just start painting. Notice that as I'm painting, on the right hand side, right in this area here, the window starts disappearing. So now I can see the fine details in the overall image at the same time. So I don't have to keep zooming in to look at the detail and then zoom out to see how the image looks and then zoom back in. That becomes really inefficient really quickly. Working with this technique allows you to do both at the same time. So I can come and remove maybe these windows, and you can see on the right hand side that the image is updating. And to be frank with you, on a real project, what you probably would do is set this to 100%. So the 100% view would give you a much better representation of what is going on. And now that we're working with the clone stamp tool, I'm going to show you a couple of keyboard shortcuts that may help you. So I'm just going to select that window so you can see it there. So you can obviously paint and clone that window. I'm going to undo that. And there's a keyboard shortcut that allows you to rotate the clone source. You can hold Alt, Shift, and the less than, greater than keys. Those are the same keys as the comma and period. So Alt, Shift, Option, Shift, and then the less than key rotates the clone source. See how that window is rotating? So now, when I start painting, it's not going to paint it the way it's shown here. It's just going to paint the side of it like so. So now it looks like we have the window going sideways. But anyway, I'm going to undo that. The other thing that you can do is scale. So I'm going to sample this window. There it is. If I paint it, looks like that. I'm going to undo, and you can scale by using the bracket keys. So Alt Shift and the bracket keys. Right bracket key is scaling up. And now when I paint, it's a much larger window. Or, of course, I can scale down with the left bracket key. Much, much smaller. Now if I paint, it's a smaller window. So those keys are there to help you when you're cloning. If you don't want to remember keyboard shortcuts, the way to access that via a panel is by going into Window, Clone Source, and here they are. You can see the rotations that I made here, so I can rotate it even further and then start painting. And I can scale it by using this slider. So now I can start painting, and now it's a really, really tiny pencil. One advantage of using the clone source is that you can sample 5 different sample sources. So I'm going to reset this, and I'm going to select the first sample source. So that's for that window. So when I start painting, you'll see that window. I can select another sample source, and that could be for that tree. And the third sample source, and maybe that could be for this top part of the castle here. So then I can go back to the first one, which was the window. So I can start painting windows. I can go to the second one, which was the tree, continue painting the tree. The third one was this top part of the castle, and I can continue painting with that. So keep these tips in mind next time that you're retouching your photos. In this tip, I'm going to show you how to work better with color range. So we're going to work with this image here, and if we wanted to change the red on her shirt to something else or simply adjust it, we will need to make a selection to only select the reds. One of the ways of doing that, of course, is by going into Select, Color Range. Color Range allows us to select the color and add colors to that selection, and we can see the preview here in this window. And we can adjust how the colors are selected by dragging this fuzziness slider. If we start selecting the red on her shirt, and then adding to that selection by selecting different kinds of red, and we start adjusting the fuzziness slider, we do an okay job, but we're selecting a lot of the background and other areas of the image. Instead, what you should do is create a selection around the area that you want to select. So I'm just going to create a rectangular marquee selection around her shirt. Then go back into the Select Color Range command, and we're focusing that area. And that is really the first tip. You can make a selection around the area that the color range command should focus on, and that will make it easier for you to make your selections. And I can just click on the red and add the different reds to the selection and adjust the fuzziness slider so that we only select that red. Now keep in mind that it's going to be next to impossible not to select the hands or the railing that she's leaning on because it's really close to the different shades of red that we've selected. So you can just press OK for now, and with the lasso tool, simply hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and just do very loose selections around the hands, the camera, the railing, and all the other areas that shouldn't be selected. And notice that I'm going quickly and I'm not being precise at all. Then I can simply go into the hue and saturation adjustment layer, a layer mask will be created based on that selection, and now we can adjust the red on her shirt, as simple as that. In this tip, I'm going to show you how you can work with the LAB color mode to enhance your images. So we're going to work with this image here. It's an RGB image, and that is one of the most common color modes to work in Photoshop. The other one that you might have heard of is the CMYK color mode, usually for print, but there is another color mode that we can use, and that is the LAB color mode. So I'm going to select the LAB color mode, and if you click on the channels panel, you'll notice that you no longer have RGB. Now you have lightness, A, and B. So lightness is the detail of the image, the luminance values. A is a relationship between green and magenta, and B is a relationship between blue and yellow. And I actually have a graphic here to show you that. Also notice that these are the same colors as the tint slider in Lightroom and Camera Raw, and these are the same colors as the temperature slider in Lightroom and Camera Raw. But anyway, we're going to come back into the LAB channels panel, And this becomes really useful because you can do several things. And I'm going to duplicate this layer just to show you a couple of things that you can do. You can work with color without affecting detail. So if I wanted to turn that dress green in the A channel, I can simply press Control-I, Command-I on the Mac to invert. That dress is now green. Obviously it affected the entire layer, but I can go in there and make a selection around the dress, and this is obviously going to be really quick and not very precise, but you'll get the idea. And I can create a layer mask, and there it is. I missed a few spots, but as I said, this will be good enough for the example. So you can work with color without affecting the detail. The luminance of the image is still there. That is one advantage of working in the LAB color mode. Another advantage is that you can add sharpening to an image without affecting color. And let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to press Ctrl-J, Command-J on the Mac to duplicate. And I'm going to make sure that my new layer, layer 1, is selected. I'm going to go into the channels panel, select the lightness. I can go into filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and I'm just going to bump up the sharpness really, really high. It's going to be an extreme so you can see the difference. So obviously I sharpen the image, and there it is. And just as a side note, Photoshop doesn't really add detail to an image. It creates the illusion of detail by adding contrast to edges in the image. So that's really what you're doing when you're sharpening images. And you can see that here, that contrast to fake sharpness. But anyway, I'm going to go back into the layers panel. And in this layer, in this background layer, I'm going to duplicate that as well. And I'm just going to apply that same filter, unsharp mask. If I go into the first option, that's the last filter that I applied. So I'm going to apply the exact same thing again. The one on top was the one that I did with the luminance channel. So it only affected the luminance of the image. And look at the difference. See that? I'm going to zoom into her arm. You can see that here. It affected the colors. Using the luminance channel, it did not. And you can see that all throughout the images. There are different areas where the sharpening affected the color. So you can see that on her nose, on her lips, and on her legs. So this is one tip that you can use to apply sharpening without affecting the color. It's subtle, but in some cases it makes a huge difference. So I'm going to fit the image to screen. I'm going to delete both of these layers. And just to show you the power of working with LAB, how would you in RGB invert the luminance values but not the colors? It would be somewhat difficult, and the easiest way to do it, I think, is through the LAB color mode. So here in the LAB color mode, I can just press Control-I, Command-I on the Mac to invert, and that inverts that channel. We select LAB, and look at that. We actually have the same original colors, but we inverted the luminance. So this makes it very clear that you can work with luminance separate from color, and that becomes very useful in a lot of ways when you're retouching your images. So I can bring that back by selecting that lightness, pressing Control-I, Command-I to invert, and we get our original image back. One thing to note is that when you're working with adjustment layers, they're going to be a little different. Notice that we have LAB instead of RGB, and not all the adjustments are available. So we can make our adjustments to the lightness and not affect the color. I'm going to briefly go back into the RGB version of that. So I'm just going to revert to original by pressing the F12 key. You can also get to it by going into File and Revert. And what that does is that it takes our image back to the last time that we saved it. And if we haven't saved the image, to how it first looked when we opened it. So here we are. You can see the RGB label there in the tab. And if I create a curves adjustment layer and make a similar adjustment as to what I did in the LAB color mode, and I zoom in, you'll notice that I'm affecting the color. The one way that I can work with luminance without affecting color in the RGB color mode will be by using a blending mode. So I can select luminosity as a blending mode and look at the difference. Now I can work with luminance without affecting the color. So that's one trick of you getting something similar as you would with LAB. So I'm going to delete this adjustment layer. I'm going to go back into the LAB color mode. And there I am. You can see now that the tab reads LAB. I'm going to create a curves adjustment layer. And once again, I'm working with luminance without affecting color. If I change the blending mode to luminosity, it looks exactly the same. There's no difference. I'm only working with luminance detail in the L channel. And the last thing I want to mention is that if you decide to work with this color mode and you want to go back into RGB, you are going to run into a problem if you are using adjustment layers. So I'm going to go into mode, RGB, and Photoshop is going to tell us that we cannot convert because we have an adjustment layer. We can either flatten the image, which is destructive and we don't want to do that, or we can discard the adjustment layer, so we will lose it and lose the adjustment, so we don't want to do that. So instead, if you do work with adjustment layers and LAB, just put them into a smart object. So select all the layers by clicking on them and holding shift, right click and select convert to smart object. Then you can go into image, mode, RGB, don't rasterize, and that gets you back into the RGB color mode. Look at the tab, and there's my smart object. I can double click on it. It takes me inside to where I have my curves adjustment layer. You can see that I'm in the LAB color mode here in the channels panel. To confirm, I can go into image, mode, and LAB selected. And if you want to find out more about the LAB color mode and how it works, I would recommend checking out Dan Margolis. There's probably no one else in the world that knows more about LAB than Dan, so check him out. And that's it for this tutorial. Let me know what you thought about these 5 tips in the comments below. Don't forget to include your favorite tips for photographers and retouching in the comments as well. If this is your first time at the Photoshop Training channel, don't forget to click on that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Welcome back to another very exciting tutorial here at the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. My name is Jesus Ramirez, and you can find me on Twitter at JR from PTC. In this video, I'm going to share with you the recording of the live presentation I did for the Photoshop in Lightroom group on Facebook. This presentation is titled 60 Minutes of Photoshop Tips and Tricks. It's a collection of some of my favorite Photoshop workflows, tips, and techniques. And one thing I do want to mention is, as you're watching, if you enjoy what you're looking at, leave a comment below and let me know what your favorite tip or trick is. Before we get started with the recording, I want to mention that I have a new Instagram account. If you'd like to add me on Instagram, my username is JR from PTC. Okay, here's the recording to the presentation.
Okay, we are now live, so thanks everyone for attending. We have 237 participants. So I'd like to take this time to introduce today's presenter, Jesus Ramirez. Jesus is a digital graphics expert and online educator specializing in Adobe Photoshop.